It's Joy here with Real Progressives. Tonight I am joined by a really special guest that I'm really surprised I got, I should say Lieutenant Governor of Vermont, Mr. David Zuckerman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, tomorrow is an amazing day in Vermont. It is primaries. Now, Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman does not have a primary because nobody's taking him on.
Oh. In the primary, there's certainly someone in the general could take him out. Yeah.
Yes, he is going against an establishment Republican in the general. But yeah, tomorrow's the big day. And you guys had mail-in voting already start.
Yeah.
How is the turnout as far as voting so far?
Turnout in Vermont's pretty darn low, actually. There's a huge difference from 2 years ago. Well, we had two different primaries 2 years ago. Bernie's primary for president was in March, but the legislative primary was in August, like it is now. But that year, we had a massive Democratic primary for governor. We had a massive Republican primary for governor. The primary I was in for lieutenant governor had been running for 9 months, which is much longer than normal. So there's way more activity, way more early voting. So this year, it's expected to have dropped off quite a bit. I think a couple of years ago, and primary is always pathetically low, which is very depressing. I think it was like 16 or 18% turnout. And this year, I think it's going to be 6 to maybe 10% if we're lucky. We now have an incumbent Republican governor. He is a primary because he signed a gun bill. So the hard right gun folks are out to get him. I don't think they'll succeed. The Democratic primary is not as vibrant as it was a couple of years ago. And then my own race, there is no primary. So I think it's going to be pretty low. There's some local House races and Senate races, but.
Wow, well, all you people in Vermont need to get out there and vote for Bernie. Come on now.
I know. I keep saying to people, look, we're Bernie's state, and we have all this enthusiasm everywhere else in the country with great enthusiasm, great turnouts, great pizzazz. I think it's interesting. I think in the general election, and Bernie is on the ballot, not in a particularly hard race, I think people will be coming out in a big way just to be like, we love Bernie here, so whatever y'all did in other parts of the country, including places where he won, we're going to come out and show you what we feel for Bernie. So I think we'll have turnout in the general election, but the primary is going to be pretty quiet.
Wow. I'm sure you probably, I know all of my other candidates say that they do deal with a lot of defeatism right now. A lot of people feel like their vote does not count. We saw the way Bernie was cheated in 2016. Right. So what is your response to people when they say, what's the point?
Well, I guess a couple things. Certainly in Vermont, we actually have paper ballots that we put in and they're scanned. So we have the backup. So as far as votes counting, we know for all practical purposes, we can always get a double check, which for those of you in states that have only electronic machines, I feel for you. And I would say you should demand campaign finance reform and electoral reform with paper ballot backup. I mean, just to restore trust and confidence in the system, those two things are critical. But I also say, on the one hand, we can be defeatist and not vote, but that's exactly what they want, right? I mean, they've been pushing for low turnout. They've been telling your government's bad, particularly the Republicans, and then the Democrats haven't really gotten us that enthusiastic to get behind them because they're not pushing economic justice issues, social justice issues, environmental justice, healthcare. But I don't think that not voting is really the way that we strike back. I mean, what does that really accomplish? They just go, well, turnout's low. People that showed up get to make the decisions. And in fact, I would say quite the opposite. If turnout's normally 40% and we get 10% bump in turnout because we take over, well, that's going to totally flip any election that's out there. And it could even be an organized write-in for somebody just to say, I want Michael Moore. I'm in Michigan, or whatever. I mean, I don't know who's on the ballot there. Maybe there's a good person in some spots. But we have to take over the electoral system. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, absolutely. You've actually held a number of positions in government. You actually, and I digress a little, but I want to say you are actually in the Vermont Progressive Party, which is pretty amazing. I'm in Pennsylvania. We have like Dem, Republican, like.
Well, you're like 90%, 98.9% of the country. The Progressive Party in Vermont started as the Progressive Coalition back in the 80s and 90s. We converted it into a party in the mid-90s when I was in the Vermont House. And now, as some people are aware, probably on average more people in this group than any other, the Vermont Progressive Party is the most established third party of any in the country. We have more people holding office in Vermont with a progressive banner than all other third parties combined in the country, as far as the legislature goes. And oddly enough, I pinch myself sometimes. I can't believe it, but I'm apparently the highest elected third party person in the country. And I do it dual. I served for 14 years as a progressive in the House. Then in running for the Senate in Vermont, where I served for 4 years, I did run in the Democratic primary. And so I ran as a progressive/Democrat on the general ballot. And same with lieutenant governor. I won the Democratic primary. My race I called Bernie 2.0. They tried things in Vermont much as they did to Bernie, but it was not on the scale. And also I was better known within this smaller area than compared to what Bernie was trying to overcome nationwide, and was able to win the primary. So I run as a progressive/Democrat as well. So this is the end of my 20th year of public office.
Wow.
And I should add, I was inspired by Bernie back in 1992, the way that his energy and so many watchers of this and others became inspired when you learned about him basically 3 years ago. And I guess what I want to say to people from that is, I was a college student. I was an activist on environmental issues. My thought was, bleep the two parties. They're all corporate, paid off. It's frustrating as all heck. Different word actually than that. But anyway, and Bernie inspired me. And I think what you're seeing all across the country is people being inspired and running for school board, running for alderman, alderwoman, running for mayor, running for legislature. I mean, Ocasio. I mean, that's just incredible, right? And in some places winning. But guess what, folks? We do lose. I lost my first time, and I came back 2 years later and won. And so I just, there is no other option. I have a 12-year-old daughter. I think about our climate. I think about our Supreme Court, which is the most depressing thing of all about Trump getting elected. Those two things, and it gets me down. But then I go, well, we're definitely not going to improve it if we just sit back and drown our sorrows. We've got to fight back for our own children, for our siblings, for our friends, for all the flora and fauna that we're wiping out. We have nothing but the responsibility to engage.
Absolutely. Future generations are going to ask us what we did in this chaotic time. And
there you go.
Being a slacktivist isn't the best way to represent.
You need to take a break when you need it, though. Recharge your battery, like be engaged. But if you need a break to just go to the beach or go to the river or walk in the woods or play a sport with a friend, I mean, you do need to recharge your batteries, but you can't give up.
I'm recharging to Burlington, Vermont next month. My first time in Vermont. Cool. I'm taking a little Bernie tour.
Going to be here on the weekend?
Yes, it'll be the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th of September.
I will probably be at the farmer's market.
I know. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So you guys, this is how awesome Burlington is. Their lieutenant governor has a stand at the farmer's market. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Been growing vegetables for 25 years. 5 of those for others. This is the 20th anniversary of our farm. And 20 acres of organic vegetables, organic chickens, organic pigs. Yep.
That is so awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So
Cool.
you had a lot to do with that agriculture. You were the was it a co-chairman of the Vermont House in agriculture?
I was chair of the ag committee for 4 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. And what kind of things did you do?
Well, we did a number of things. We started farm to school so that there was more agricultural support from the state to help schools start gardens on their schools so the kids would be able to grow food and bring it into their cafeterias. We were augmenting some nonprofit work that was going on. We actually expanded the ability of small, 1 to 5 cow farms to directly sell their milk, raw milk, to customers, whereas they weren't able to advertise that. And we implemented over a number of years, both when I was chair and afterwards, expansions of the opportunity to have access to raw milk. We've expanded the opportunity for small farms to slaughter some of their own animals and sell the food directly to their consumers. When you have that direct relationship, you don't need as much government regulation as when you have industrial food that goes through 16 different hands and nobody knows where it came from. So we've tried to expand a number of those things. We've looked a lot at more recently at regenerative agriculture. Wasn't chair anymore. I was vice chair in the Senate. We started looking at that. So there's a lot of different. The committee did forestry work as well, but a lot of interest in sustainable ag in Vermont. So we're slowly trying to create those opportunities.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw that you were the lead in the Senate, the lead author in the Senate of Vermont's first in the nation GMO labeling law. So can you go into that a little more?
Well, yeah, and for a little more background, back in college in environmental studies, I started learning about GMOs with the original flavor saver tomato and some other issues, and what that meant, not so much really to the individual health of those of us eating it, but frankly what it meant to our agricultural production system and monocropping and huge swaths of land, which then meant reducing biodiversity, more reliance on some of the agrochemicals that are then used in conjunction with the GMOs. And when I was in the legislature early on in 1999, I started introducing bills around whether neighboring farms that got contaminated would have the ability to go after not the farmer, but the seed company that produced the GMO, because the seed companies keep ownership. So they say to the farmer, we're leasing you the right to use a seed, you can't save the seed. And we said, okay, well, if the company owns a seed, if Monsanto owns a seed, they own the pollen, that's their whole patent thing. Well, if that patent ends up in my organic corn and costs me money, I don't want to sue my neighbor farmer. They're my neighbor. Our kids are friends, and we might not farm the same way, but we're neighbors. Since Monsanto owns it, they need to own it. And we passed a strict liability bill through the House and the Senate, but then Republican Governor Douglas vetoed that bill. We were never able to get that through. So since '99, I was working on GMO bills, and it was finally in 2014, while I was vice chair of the Senate Ag Committee, that we were able to pass it. It did go into effect, and the process was going on for a couple of years, and as of the summer of 16, labels were on a lot of products as of July 1st. And of course, 3 weeks later, after over $100 million of corporate lobby money in Washington, they overthrew our law. And now they're doing propaganda pro-GMO labeling, which is really tearing me apart. But yeah, I was probably one of the first legislators in the country to introduce legislation regulating GMOs. Wow,
that's incredible. I was looking back at the things you've done in the Senate, and I kept doing double takes. Is this Bernie? Or your policies are so much like his. And this is pre-2015 Bernie. So like now
I'm starting to lose some of it. Right.
Do you put your hands out like oligarchy, like when you talk? Or?
I don't. I've occasionally done, millionaires and billionaires and things like that, but no, not too much. We have fun with it. But,
well, he's definitely inspired, millions, but pre 2015, it's incredible just to see how similar your goals are. It states that you were involved in passing marriage equality laws, workers' rights legislation, increasing minimum wage, cannabis reform, universal health care, like basically all these things that are still so pertinent that we're still talking about.
Right.
So where are you with these things? Do you guys have anything on the table?
We do. I want to show you something because a friend of mine, when I visited him in Charlottesville a year ago, my mom was in the hospital, and he pulled out an old button, and I don't know if this is going to work. It doesn't quite show up. But Dave Zuckerman and Dean Corn, we ran together in 1994, so it's a Bernie 94 button, and then Dean Corn and Dave Zuckerman. I don't know if it's backwards or not, but I had the green, yellow, and red stripes under there, which is from the Rastafari colors. So I was working on cannabis reform since 1994. And it was only last year that we finally passed essentially a DC style model, not last year, this January. So now people can legally possess and consume cannabis in Vermont. And now I lost track of the question because I was looking that up while you were asking it. But no, I just, my dad was a medical doctor and very interested in medical ethics. My mom was on the school board growing up. We weren't necessarily a hard left family. They were fairly traditional. He was a doctor. She went to, she had a PhD in biochemistry and then went on to nursing school, but not aggressive left politics, just social values left politics. And I was, like I said, an activist on the campus at UVM for a number of years. And environment was really my passion. But it was in 1992 when I saw Bernie speaking, and I was like, here's a guy who's not involved with the two corporate parties. Here's a guy that doesn't take corporate donation. Here's a guy that's speaking from his heart and his mind, what he believes. He's not pulling punches in order to make sure he doesn't make anybody uncomfortable. It's like, here's what I am. Take it or leave it. Like, if I'm not suited for you, don't vote for me. I'm not going to try to get you to vote for me if you don't really like what I'm going to do, because then you're not going to like what I do. And so it's just that straightforward nature and sticking up for issues is what I learned from him. And really, he tied together for me the bottom line that as long as there's economic injustice, we will not ultimately solve many of our other injustices, whether they be social injustices, environmental injustices, and within the social category, you've got, gender, race, so many different injustices, obviously. But really, as long as people are struggling and people are having a hard time paying their bills and they want to point their finger at someone and blame the other, which is what Trump has been a master at, spinning up, they're not going to be able to see that we are all better off when we help each other out. So really, the economic foundation is key. And just learning that, watching him back in, 92, 94, 96, 98, that really honed my values in that direction. And I've been fighting for him ever since.
Absolutely. I had Jeff Weaver on recently, nice. And we talked about some amazing stories from the 80s.
Yeah, that was before me.
It's so amazing learning about Bern because he's always pretty much been the same person. I mean,
it was true for the campaign. The media didn't understand it. They're like, he doesn't change. Isn't that boring? And people are like, no, he actually believes in something.
It's reliable. We like it. There's been, now, granted, you aren't, technically a Democrat, but.
Well, I am. I win the Democratic primary and I win the progressive primary. So now I am both. Yep.
So what are your thoughts? There's been a couple things recently, specifically, what about the oil money? All of a sudden they announced they wouldn't take it a month ago, and now they announced they're going to start taking it again. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a lot at the national level, I'm assuming. I have truly primarily focused at the state level. I think sometimes it can be overwhelming trying to fight every fight at every level all the time. And I think, we sort of have politics upside down. A lot of folks vote every 4 years president and don't vote in between mid-year races and don't vote in the local elections. And if you really look at where the Republicans succeeded, is they built up from the bottom. And I just think we got to tackle these things on, race by race at the local level. Show you could win without corporate money, whether it's oil, pharmaceutical, petrochemical, massive seed fraud companies, whatever. To me, so it's frustrating, no doubt. But here's the reality too, and it's a reality we don't like to face, we don't like to own, as the parties. And in Vermont, the Progressive Party doesn't take corporate donations, and it's been a long, slow build. But the understanding of how politics works, at least the way it's played right now, is with huge sums of money. And the only way the Democrats can even have a chance at having as much money as the Republicans is accepting that money. And they're caught in this awful spot, which is they have to need the money, but then they're stuck with the consequence of taking the money. And Bernie obviously showed that you don't need the corporate money. At the same time, there's not a lot of people like Bernie. And not a lot of people, he started running for office in early 70s, as long as I've been alive. And so to a lot of the viewers out there, and I don't know, how old you are, and I'm not going to ask, but, imagine committing the next 48 years of your life to social justice. And I think a lot of people now are committed and believe they're committed. Many will be in their day-to-day decisions, but actually like engaging in politics for 48 years, a lot of people aren't going to do that. And, he didn't get to where he was and be that person without just being an activist for 40 years. So it's hard for some people in the Democratic Party who have been groomed for the last 6 years and worked into the right position to hobnob with the right people and raise the right money. You can't build a 40-year resume in 6 years. So we now have to do that. And we have to engage at the local level and get engaged and make change better for people on the street right outside your door and downtown and in the other neighborhoods, and, rebuild and fix that house with your neighbors, or start a community gardens or whatever it is. And you got to build your way up through the community and grow like a big old sequoia tree. It takes time to build your tree. And so the Democrats are kind of stuck. They're stuck with the need of that money because they don't have that soul that Bernie has. And some do. I work with plenty of really excellent Democrats. I work with some really excellent people who are Republicans. I don't agree with them on some issues. But at the state level and the local level, there is a humanity between us that is quite common. And if we get so wrapped up in labels, we can actually sort of write people off who don't need to be written off.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. And I think Bernie drives that home a lot too. That you're not evil just because of who you voted for. That's people have their own reasons for voting for people. And that's a really good point. We're not going to come together. We're not going to have any kind of semblance of unity if we keep attacking each other, because we do all want the same things. We want good health care. We want jobs. We want these things.
We want our kids to grow up healthy. The person who works for the coal mining industry as a coal miner in West Virginia is not a bad person. They're just trying to provide for their family, and there's not a lot of options there. And many of them have suffered at the hands of their corporate owners of their businesses too. So even a lot of the voters and a lot of the people that went the other way, or whatever other way you want to call the other way, but helped elect Trump, many of them are people that would have voted for Bernie because they're just struggling and they're so frustrated with the system not giving them a chance. And so if we just yell at them through social media and scream at them, we don't bring them along. I've always felt the best thing to do is go to where someone is, learn what their struggle and their challenge is, and then work with them to see how they might be yelling at government right now because the Republican puppet strings have made them think government's a terrible thing, when in reality, the puppet strings are not only puppeting them in that way, but they're actually running government with all their corporate money, and that they're allowing themselves to be duped by these people to hate government, which is the one thing that can equalize the playing field for them against the oligarchs and the millionaires, you know. So we have to sit and break bread and drink wine or water or beer or cider, and communicate with people.
We do, right on. What? How do you deal with the divide, even in the progressive movement? Because, you know, Democrats and Republicans, we've always kind of butted heads, but like even in the progressive movement, there's just this huge divide, especially social media. It's kind of toxic to be on here a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, I guess a couple things. One is we can spend our time fighting with each other about how to be more perfect, from being 95% perfect to being 98% perfect, or that my way is the right way, you're completely wrong, I can't believe you're thinking that way to deal with this issue, or this dynamic in some race. And I just don't see the productivity there. You know, I just see internal frustration building up. I see I just don't see positivity coming out of that. What I want to do every day, and I just here, I'll bring in a personal story. Sadly, a neighbor farmer down the road I've known for 25 years. We used to farm together on rented, not together, but right next to each other on rented land, 20 miles away from here. He, 51 years old, had a heart attack and died 3 weeks ago. And his daughter, at the service yesterday, which was an amazing, you know, 500 people were there. He just touched so many people's lives. But she said when he dropped her off at school every day, he said to her, "Be the best you can be." And I think when we fight with each other, when we argue with each other in a negative way, we're not being the best that we can be. And we have a real opportunity if we take the good intentions and the good hearts that we all have and always work when we see someone else in anguish or pain, which often comes out as anger, and figure out how to offer them comfort and a listening ear. And then when they're ready, start walking in a new direction with them and helping them move in a better direction. That's when we're the best that we can be. And if we're going to fight with each other about who's more pure than the next, we're missing out on a lot of opportunities. I'll give another metaphor. When I was running in the Democratic primary 2 years ago, there was no doubt there were 400 to 500 hardcore Democrats that would never vote for me, even after I won the primary, because I was not a true blue Democrat. I was a progressive who ran in the Democratic primary. The party is not my first priority. They're wedded to the party. They've done 30 years of activism for the party. They just would not support me. They wouldn't vote for the other guy, but they just wouldn't vote. And I had the opportunity to spend 2 to 4 to 8 hours a day talking to a couple of them each day, trying to convince them why they would vote for anybody else or not vote when the options were so clear. I mean, I had a very conservative Republican running against me. Or I could look to the other 400,000 possible voters in the state and spend those same hours talking to dozens and dozens and hundreds of other people about the issues that matter to them, and work to give them information about myself and hopefully encourage them to vote for me. Again, we can spend hours fighting with each other about who's more perfect, or we can spend those hours organizing, getting people out to rallies, giving people information about how a universal healthcare system would work and make their life better, getting them out information about their water quality and why we need to organize to make sure the city provides cleaner water. Whatever the local issue is, how much time are people spending on their computer bickering with each other versus going out there, being the best organizer they can be, and helping reach out to those people that right now are turned off to the system? I just think that's a better way to spend our time.
Right on. Absolutely. What is something that you feel that should be, I mean, there's so many things, but what do you think we should focus on as a priority?
What would be the, I hate the number one priority stuff because there's a lot of burning fires out there. But to me, probably organizing locally and working on energy and climate issues. I don't think we're going to win this Supreme Court fight right now, which is an incredibly depressing thing to say. But you have to understand when you've lost a certain battle to then go out and make sure you win the next battle so that we don't end up in the circumstance we're in today. And the two things that I cried about on that night in 2016 was the Supreme Court and climate change. And I was holding my daughter that whole night because her reproductive freedoms and health choices are paramount. And 50 years of Supreme Court decisions will take a long time to turn around, centuries to turn around. Climate change, if we don't do something about that, we won't turn it around. And so I would say economic justice and climate change. And the reason I threw economic justice in there is because if you're struggling to pay your bills, you're not going to buy recycled toilet paper for 50 cents more a roll. You are saving every penny to pay your electric bill or your rent, or if you're lucky enough to have a mortgage, or to pay off your college loans. If we're not getting paid enough money to meet your basic needs, you're not going to spend your money or may have time for choices around climate change. And so, yeah, we got to raise the minimum wage, paid family leave, and all work on, save a little money and turn your heat down a little bit, on climate change. Wear a sweater in the winter. Let the air conditioning be at 68, not 66 or 65. Just slowly acclimate it up a degree every few days, and you won't even notice when you come in from a 90-degree day in the summer. So it's personal, individual choices we need to make along the way. It's engage our community in economic justice issues, and organize and be the best you can be every day.
Do you support a federal job guarantee?
I don't actually, again, I haven't really looked as deeply at that issue, and some people might go, oh my God, he doesn't know anything about anything because he hasn't looked at that. But, I don't know whether it's a federal job guarantee or a guaranteed minimum income. I think we certainly can look at those things until we deal with, I think until we really change the mindset of Congress, we're so far from those ideas. We really have to get the public grabbing onto the idea of what, the failure of trickle down, which I actually consider more sponge up. It just sucks the money all up to the top, right? So we've got to completely go out there and talk about these issues with, again, those people that have just been watching it and absorbing it for 40 years of propaganda. And we've got to shift that mindset. And as we shift that mindset, we'll start electing more and more people who would consider job guarantee or universal health care or, free college. Yeah, happy to entertain it. It's just, I don't know all the details.
Sure. I'm looking at the comments as well. Looks like you definitely have a lot of fans. So
I haven't clicked on that to read them as we go. I was going to read them later, but okay, go ahead.
So in Vermont, what is something that you think you would like to work on in a re-election that you have not yet been able to focus on?
Could you repeat that? Because now I was just looking at some comments. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Should you be reelected, what is something you would like to focus on that you haven't yet been able to?
Well, boy, we've done a lot. We've created a weekly newsletter out of our office, which in Vermont, the lieutenant governor has one staff person. So I have one chief of staff. She's the chief of herself. Meg is amazing.
Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, and she helped set this up. You communicated with her some. We've done a lot around trying to get the environmental community and the labor community to know each other better and stand in solidarity together on some issues here in Vermont. I'd like to do more with that. In Vermont, we have a really, we're the most single commodity dependent agricultural state in the country, and that's dairy, which is really struggling right now. Dairy farmers, you're in Pennsylvania, you've got dairy farmers there for sure. They're closing up shop. They're getting crushed. And I had intended to do more around the dairy industry and trying to create a Vermont brand of milk for the southern New England, New York markets that could maybe garner a slight premium out of the marketplace and get our old family farms viable again. Fundamentals. Those are, environmental justice and economic justice issues. And I've been doing a lot of work with schools and younger people trying to instill the importance of the foundation of our democracy and the power of engagement. And I had a saying from a few years back. There was, or last year maybe, we had a bunch of rallies around organic production. And there's a bunch of hydroponic organics, and some of your viewers may know about this, most probably don't. But a lot of the berries are grown just in nutrient water. And as an organic farmer, it's all about keeping your soil healthy. And we've been fighting at the national level with the Standards Board about whether just hydroponics could be organic. And many of us don't think that's right. And I ultimately pointed out that our soil, as the root of our plants, has so many microorganisms and different nutrients and so much to it. And I said, organic without soil is like democracy without people. And so I've been going to schools and trying to instill in young people that if they don't, that they have to participate. And participation can be through organizing. It can and eventually should be through voting. Some of them are too young to vote. But that if we want to see that change, and we actually get out there and support people and vote people in, that'll do it, we would win. You look at all the polling of millennials and 20s and 30s and even into the 40s on all the progressive issues. The support is hands down. If they all voted and or ran for office, gave people a choice to vote for that supported those issues, we would win. So it's just about trying to be aspirational and motivational and make sure people realize that, and that's how we're going to take it over.
Absolutely. I tell all my guests, the viewers who are complaining about things, I tell them the only time you're going to agree with a politician is if you get off your ass and run yourself. So otherwise you're not going to agree with them 100%.
I'll even tell you, you don't even always agree with yourself 100% of the time.
That's a very good point.
Has everybody out there made every decision perfectly every moment of their life? I don't think so. There are times you look back, whether it's how you raise your child in a particular moment when you were more frustrated than you wish you were and you wish you addressed the circumstance better, whether it's a workplace decision you made, whether it's a colleague and how you treated them in your moment of frustration. We all make mistakes and we all make wrong decisions sometimes. If your goal is perfection, you're going to be a very depressed person for your whole life. But you're probably going to agree with yourself more as an elected official than you're right. Anybody else that you might have potentially representing you.
No doubt. If there is something you want to leave our audience with, what do you want them to take away from this interview?
I guess it goes back to the beginning of don't get sort of depressed and down. Take any energy, any frustration, any anger, anything you've got, and say, what am I going to do with this to make somebody's day better? It could just be one person on the corner who you give an apple to who's hungry. It could be pulling over to help someone fix a flat tire who's got a Make America Great Again bumper sticker on their car. They deserve help fixing their flat tire too. It might be going out and spending an hour door knocking and giving out information about universal health care. Take your frustrated energy and make it into something positive. That's all we have is the ability to make someone, including our own day, a little better. And if we all do that instead of trolling each other and beating the crap out of each other, it's hard for people to yell at you when you're giving them a rose, or a tulip. And you look back even at the 60s, giving the soldiers flowers, showing love when they don't expect it. And I think that's how we make the world better.
Absolutely. I love what a hippie you are. I, when I met you, I was like, oh, he has long hair. He works at a farmer's market. This is amazing.
Well,
I
I
love it.
appreciate it. I will say we do have to wrap it up a little bit because it's going to rain in a couple hours. And even though it's dark, our crew didn't quite get the basil harvested. So I'm going to go out and harvest some basil for wholesale for tomorrow. So I got to get out. I'm in a suit right now because I was at a meeting all afternoon. But so I got to go finish the farming, and it's getting late. So I've been
Yeah,
up since
no problem. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You're awesome. I'm sure you're going to do amazing. I hope to see you next month.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to scrolling through the comments if I'm able to later. I just want to say to anybody who's viewing this, if you want to reach out to me, it's ltgov.vermont.gov in the official capacity, or Zuckerman4vt.com in the political capacity. And please feel free to reach out, and I'll try and answer any other follow-up questions. And I'm on Facebook somewhere too. I'm whatever. I can't keep track of it all.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I have Tim Canova coming back on Wednesday for my 1-year anniversary show. Cool. Nice. He was my very first guest, and we're coming full circle. So nice. Thank you once more, Lieutenant Governor. I really appreciate it.
All righty. Bye-bye.